The following is a little-known story about the courage and will to survive of a World War II submarine vet, George Rocek. What happened to Rocek is the stuff of legends, but it all truly took place. On 18th of November, the USS Sculpin, SS-191, George's boat, encountered a Japanese convoy in her patrol zone and began to give chase. The following day, after more than 9 hours of combat, the Sculpin suffered a fatal shelling by the Japanese destroyer that was relentlessly pursuing her, the Yamagumo. The commanding officer of the Sculpin, Fred Conaway, was instantly killed when a blast directly struck the conning tower. Because the boat had secret information about the upcoming invasion of Corregidor, the combat CO and 10 other officers decided to go down with the ship. The order to abandon ship was given. Rocek made it to the surface with 40 of his shipmates. Picked up by the Yamagumo, each man was blindfolded and put in a small cell. Given a small cup of rice and a few ahs of water daily, they steamed for 10 days toward a temporary POW camp on the island of Truk for torture and questioning. Men were left to wash their wounds with their own urine, and one man had his hand amputated with no anesthesia. After 12 days they were split into 2 groups. Rocek's group had 21 men, and they were put on the Japanese carrier Shuyo to take them to a permanent POW camp on the mainland. All 21 men were put into a small detainment cell 3 decks below the flight deck that was heavily guarded and secured. Unbeknownst to all was that the USS Sailfish, SS-192, was in the area and made contact with the Shuyo on December 3, 1943. The Sailfish tracked the Shuyo, and just after midnight, the first fish hit amidships. All hell broke loose. Their cell quickly filled with smoke, and started to fill with water. Groping in the dark, they found a long handle for a water valve, broke that off with much effort, and used that to pry an opening from the cell door. The actual handle was longer than this. They all crawled out. The lead man groped along the bulkhead of a passageway, and found a ladder going topside. Holding hands in a chain, they all got to the flight deck. Right next to a locker containing life jackets. 6 hours later, the Sailfish put 2 more fish into the Shuyo, and it began to sink. As the ship was sliding into the ocean, George and one shipmate slid down the flight deck right into the ocean. They barely survived the churning of the carrier's screws and the suction of the huge ship plummeting to the deep. Hours later, the Yurikaze, another Japanese destroyer, dropped over a Jacob's ladder to the floating survivors. If a man could not climb up because of injuries, they were shot on the spot. George was the only man hauled aboard. He was the only survivor of his 21-man group. As he lay on the deck exhausted, the crew jumped him and carried him to the fantail, where they planned to throw him into the sea. Just then a Japanese officer came by and halted that fate, by shouting that was against the Geneva Convention. On the 2-day voyage back to Yokohama, he was fed only one hard cracker. He was reunited with the 20 other survivors of the Sculpin, and they were shipped to a POW camp in Ofuna in late December of 1943. Ofuna was known for its particularly cruel torture of the inmates. Later he was transferred to another camp, Ashio, and spent 10 months there. While there he carved on his ration tin a tribute to his boat, the Sculpin, and the shipmates lost on her and on the journey along the way. In camp, they worked 10 hours a day for 7 days a week, and the only time George knew the war was over was then American bombers flew overhead on VJ Day in September 1945. George was liberated, spent time in the Oakland Naval Hospital before being shipped back to the Great Lakes Naval Hospital north of Chicago, and close to his boyhood home of Rockford, Illinois. George Rocek, by his indomitable will to live and his American spirit, came back to Rockford and led a normal life, surviving until 2006. A true American hero, whose story would not be known if not found and published in Subtales, stories that seldom surfaced by Charles and Frank Hood. See all 9 of our books with true stories of the US Submarine Force at subtales.com.